Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and Earth deserves more than a day. As a matter of fact, as far as we're concerned, we did it all week long.
5 days. 5 whole days.
Wow. Looking back on when we started this, Charlie, I was so looking forward to hearing such a variety of stuff on environmental justice. And we weren't just...
No. I feel like I've said this in every little update we've done, but we wanted to widen the scope of what we mean by environmental justice, and I think we did just that.
Yeah. Yes. And more today. Today is day 5, so we've got more for you today. Lizzie Baskerville from the Department of Ecology is going to be joining us shortly. But we just kind of want to go over what happened yesterday. A lot happened yesterday as well, Charlie. I had to leave and actually go do an interview on another radio station, but I was certainly here in the morning.
Yeah. You know a lot more about the American Lung Association. How is that?
Oh my gosh. To hear the folks from the American Lung Association discuss all of the different particles that are in the air just because of where we live, it made me not kind of want to go outside. But no, we just have to be diligent and aware.
Yeah.
Of what we are doing on this earth and to this earth, because ultimately the whole point of this thing is it impacts and affects us in our daily lives.
Exactly. I feel like that's been a big theme throughout the entire week, is building awareness of certain issues.
Yes.
And oftentimes that can be maybe what people view as the easy step, but I think it's also important for people to just know what's going on around them, especially in an urban environment, which we don't often consider part of environmental justice, and maybe some don't.
So if you missed the 11 to noon American Lung Association presentation yesterday, go back and check it out. Really, really critical information for you about the environment that you live in, and ultimately at the end of the day, your health. These particles go into your lungs, and then if they can, they try to get into your bloodstream, and then they can cause all kinds of problems. When that happens. So I'm not the official. And so go back and listen to the folks who are from the American Lung Association, so you can find out how you can be more diligent in protecting your health and become more aware and potentially advocate, or at the very least, share with your peers what's going on in environmental justice regarding air quality in your community and in your neighborhood. And then, Charlie, the Winds of Change presented the local ecocultural systems to barriers and access, and that was a treat.
That was a treat. It was presented in a variety of different mediums. It moved from PowerPoint to song to prayer to a variety of different things, personal stories. Yeah, that was one that I would highly recommend checking out on demand on YouTube. All of our videos are saved. That's one that I would encourage people to watch highly.
Yes, we had elders from the Muckleshoot tribe, and they did traditional drumming, and I think that was kind of a flute.
Yeah,
that
I think it was
playing.
A flute. Yeah,
it sounded like a flute.
Definitely
a woodwind instrument at the very least.
At the bare minimum, a woodwind instrument was played.
And so, yeah, there was great music involved, and then stories, as Charlie was saying. And then we did the webinar, and we heard a lot about the Fijian Islands and what's going on there, and also what they are doing, and as they put it so succinctly, sustaining our island, reflections on shared responsibility. Again, we are hyper-focusing kind of locally because we do want to make the connection with folks that there are issues and concerns that impact you directly. But this is a global issue. This is a global issue.
I thought that was a very good and important panel to have, that I thought was also connected to the Tri-Cities one, just in the sense that we're reaching out a little bit outside of King County, a little bit outside of what people would consider kind of a hub for environmental justice work, and listening to those who live in places where they may feel more underrepresented in the issue. So I thought that was a very important panel to include.
And I have not had an opportunity to go back yet and see this panel, but the executive climate equity team was
Wonderful.
here
Wonderful.
yesterday.
Yeah, they brought slides to present and didn't use a single one of them. It was very conversational. It was very passionate. You could feel it in the room. Yeah, and they felt in line with a lot of the other panelists and moderators we've had currently, in the sense that they felt very optimistic about the state of our climate, and they felt very optimistic about the work being done. And I think it also tied to our conversation with William Herbert when he was talking about how people can get involved in green jobs. They stressed that a lot in this executive climate equity team panel of how anybody can work in this. Anybody can work in this field, whether you grew up, really focused on the issue, or you grew up in an environment where you didn't feel represented in the issue. The door is open for everyone.
Now, I mentioned Lizzie Baskerville coming up here in a few minutes, but there will be a lecture by Seattle University professor Charles Warren Jeffries, whose son, Nick Jeffries, was dynamite, and he was here
He was.
a couple of different times, and was very passionate. So I am looking forward to a Professor Jeffries.
We shouted out Nick Jeffries again in the final panel because Michael Carter was wearing his Black Earth Day t-shirt.
Okay.
So I thought it was important to plug that once again. If you want to go back and watch our stream of Black Earth Day, it was a wonderful event, amazing food, amazing conversation, just all around great job by Nick and Camille from the Urban League.
And we will be finishing things off today with an amazing panel discussion led by Dr. Jeffrey Duchin of King County Public Health. Oh boy, some heavy hitters on this one as well. We're going to try and bring some of these conversations that happen at 30,000 feet down to the ground level. And these are the folks who can make it happen.
I think this might have been the best panel to choose to wrap everything up. I mean, when we're talking about environmental justice, we are often talking about health. And who better to talk about that health than the Seattle King County Public Health Board?
Yeah. Yeah, and there are other folks who are joining. I think they have 6 folks on this panel.
Yeah, I hope everybody can get a word in, because it's going to be a crowded one.
So it's scheduled to go from 2 to 3, but there is a possibility that we may need to extend it for a half an hour. But they're scheduled for 2 to 3 to see if they can get everything in. I don't know how that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it would totally be worth it to extend it to 3:30 or 4 if they keep going. I mean, I would love to hear what they're talking about.
Yes, and each of our panels essentially has either been extended or wishes they had more time, because again, Charlie, Earth deserves more than a day, and Earth Day is it's kind of a good guidepost to say, hey, let's stop and think, about what we're doing in regards to all the things that impact and affect this beloved Earth that we live on. But this is a 365-day-a-year thing.
And I think it was really important to start with Earth Day and then sort of unpack the concepts that we talk about when we talk about Earth Day, when we celebrate the Earth, ideas of sustainability and reuse and air pollution and health and access to the environment. Everything that we kind of summarize in a day, I think we've done a good job, or our panelists honestly have done a great job at unpacking that throughout the week. So it's been a pleasure to watch so far.
Mr. Bellis, if you can give us that information from King County Parks, we will go ahead and do that, and then we'll have Lizzie come out, and we'll have her presentation as well. And so we'll give Mr. Bellis an opportunity to cue that up for us. There's been so much, Charlie, I don't really want to ask you what your favorite part has been, because I know that's going to be difficult. But let's just talk about some of the things that you've enjoyed during this past week.
I would say, with a lot of bias, the YESC panel on the first day was one of my favorites. That is one of my best friends in the world, Kyle Yasui from the YMCA's Earth Service Corps. I thought that did a really important job at, one, localizing this issue, and two, connecting it to the young people in our communities that are fighting for environmental justice. And he was very optimistic. Other than that, I really enjoyed, there's so much to go through, but
I'll tell you while you're thinking about it. The kickoff panel. What is environmental justice?
Oh, that was great.
That got us started
Mhm.
on this whole thing with a variety of folks, including Kim Kamara from Executive Director of Winds of Change Alliance, Ashley Shucroft, Nancy Weezar, Andrea Godinez from King County were here, and each of them had wonderful and amazing things to say. And it kind of showed the diversity of how we think in terms of environmental justice and what it looks like and what it means and who it's impacting.
Yeah, it went from very conceptual and theoretical to very grounded in the sense of there were people here talking about what advocacy means, and there was people from our government talking about how we create policy around environmental justice. I would also say one that I forgot but does not deserve forgetting is the Resilience Hub presentation.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was, one, just an amazing idea, and two, I think our panelists that day, Bin Jung and Nancy Weezer, did a great job at stressing how community focused this is. It's not new buildings, it's not new employees, it's not someone from the government telling the community what they need, but it's spaces that are already important to communities being turned into resilience hubs and being strengthened by the community and what they want.
Yeah, this really wasn't fair, Charlie, for me to try to make you single out a couple of things because there were so many panels, and I'm thinking about it, and I can't just choose one. I have to mention Women of Wisdom from Tri-Cities. I just thought that was awesome, and to get that other perspective, and of course, the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle with Nick Jeffries and Camille, they just came and heated the microphones up.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think I said this another day, but I could listen to an hour of Nick's just pop culture references.
And then the Transit Riders Union, again, amazing information, great representation in the discussion about a levy. We're going to end up saying every panel.
Yeah. I would also like to say Rent Smart might be the most just factually important panel yet. Like, they left little booklets. They have a PDF that's available on their website. They have so much information that is just so pertinent and helpful and like very easy to understand. I thought they did a great job. It just, here's the facts.
Every panel, there's a little something in here for everyone. Mm-hmm. And certainly I think that one of the things that I enjoyed, Charlie, is the folks who were panelists who were here for other panels each said that they learned something as they had been over the course of the 5-day period. Everybody said that they learned something. That's kind of really what we're shooting for. Yeah.
If you can take one or two things away from this, then it's worth doing.
Yeah. Mr. Bellis, do we have that King County Parks message?
I'm Warren Jimenez, and I'm the director of King County Parks and Recreation. And we are partnering with Rainier Avenue Radio on their Earth Deserves More Than a Day programming. And we want to hear from you about our next Parks Levy. King County Parks will be at Columbia Cedar Theater over the next week. Tune in and drop by and tell us what you think about what's most important to you in terms of outdoor recreation and access. And take the survey, which ends by April 29th. We look forward to hearing your thoughts about what's most important to you. Let's all come together and make every day Earth Day.
Well, Charlie, we're going to pass this over to Lizzie Baskerville. Any final thoughts before we get started today?
Just excited for another day of information and another day of passionate people talking about the work that they do.
All right. Well, without further ado, let's get started. Earth deserves more than a day. This is the final day that we are going to be doing this. I will say, though, that, Charlie, everyone has said that they'd like to do this more. And even groups that were not part of the panel have said, can we get on? And it doesn't matter if it's this week in the actuality, because this is a 365-day a year thing. So you'll be hearing more from us regarding environmental justice. But this week has just been phenomenal. And we'll kick off today with Lizzie Baskerville from the Department of Ecology.
Yeah. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here and part of this week of events. And I am here representing the Washington State Department of Ecology. And I'd like to talk to you about what we're doing at the Department of Ecology for environmental justice. Um, yeah, I just wanted to start off by saying I'm an environmental justice planner at the Department of Ecology. Thank you. And before I get into what we're doing at the state, I wanted to talk a little bit about myself. So I was born and raised in Seattle. And am I doing okay with sound here? I was born and raised in Seattle, and I grew up kind of knowing that there were different neighborhoods that had different types of environmental benefits and harms. I knew that there were more trees and safer streets in some neighborhoods, and I knew that that was not the case in other neighborhoods. And growing up in Seattle, I also kind of understood what racism was, and I kind of understood what inequality was as well. But I didn't know what the term environmental justice was. I didn't have a name for that until I went to college. And that's when I kind of learned that, you know, the zip code that, oh. Thank you. Do you want me to turn this off?
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
All right. I'm going to just back up a little bit and talk about myself, and then get into the presentation. But the point I was trying to make is that growing up in Seattle, I knew that there was something going on in terms of differences in neighborhoods, but I didn't have the name for environmental justice. And once I learned more about it in college, I learned that, you know, what zip code you live in can determine what kind of hazards, environmental hazards, you're exposed to over your lifetime. And it can impact your health, and it can even impact how many years you live. And so once I learned about this and learned about the phrase environmental justice, I really wanted to get involved in that movement. And so prior to working at the Department of Ecology, I worked at some different grassroots nonprofits doing environmental justice work. But now I'm really honored to have a position of environmental justice within government. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the state to implement some environmental justice laws. And so with that, we can start the slideshow. Just 2 slides before this, I think. So at the Washington Department of Ecology, we have a mission to basically protect, preserve, and enhance the environment for current and future generations. And our vision is to have innovative partnerships that protect and sustain healthy air, land, water, and climate in harmony with a strong economy. Next slide. And we've been around as Washington State's environmental regulatory agency since 1970, which is actually predating the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And so at Washington, we've been thinking about the environment for quite a long time. But what we do is we administer the environmental laws in Washington State. Next slide. Before I get into the People of Color Environmental Justice Summit, I wanted to say that we're really lucky at the at the Department of Ecology that we have an Office of Equity and Environmental Justice. This is started in 2021, so it's fairly new that we've had formal positions that are dedicated to environmental justice at the state level, even though we've had individuals working within for a long time. And so those folks at the office are there leading the environmental justice work for the agency. And then within that, we have kind of specialized programs. So people who are into like water quality and air quality, and myself, I work in the hazardous waste and toxics reduction program. So things like making sure industry is compliant to our laws, making sure that we
don't have toxic chemicals in our products. But I work very closely with the other environmental justice planners who do water quality and air quality, because we understand that on the community level, these issues aren't separate. Communities are facing all of these different things at once. And so I just wanted to acknowledge how we got here, how we got to a place where we have jobs within state government that are dedicated to equity and environmental justice. And it's really because of the grassroots movements of decades and decades of work. And so, you know, the civil rights movement, the anti-toxics movement, the indigenous rights movement, and environmental justice academics that kind of took the stories and the experiences of people and legitimized them in studies to government were instrumental in creating kind of the job that I have today. And I always come back to this summit that was in 1991, where people laid out the principles of environmental justice, because they laid the foundation for this kind of institutional change. And these principles are something that I ground myself in and find myself coming back to in my work. Next slide, please. And so now, you know, move forward 30 years, we have a really groundbreaking piece of legislation called the Healthy Environment for All Act. And this is really about reducing environmental and health disparities, things that you all have been talking about all week, because we know, and we have known for a long time, that environmental harms are more frequently located near communities of color, in low-income neighborhoods, on tribal lands, and in indigenous communities. And these environmental harms, these exposures, lead to higher risks of adverse health outcomes. Next slide, please. If you all aren't familiar with this map, this is what we call the Environmental Health Disparities Map, and it's kind of like a snapshot of our state and where we are with some environmental justice issues. So you can see that there are red census tracts and there are blue census tracts, and they're ranked from low to high. And what this is showing us is it's kind of calculating the different kind of hazards that are in your neighborhood, like how close you are to a highway, what kind of air pollution you have, how close you are to a hazardous waste facility, if there's lead in your housing, and also what kind of socioeconomic factors are in your neighborhood, like race, income, age, things like that. And that creates a score. And so you can see that the highest score means you have the highest environmental health disparities, and the lowest score means you have the lowest environmental health disparities. And this map is just a way for us to make decisions at the state level to understand where the need is greatest, because our goal as an agency is to protect everyone equally under environmental laws. And we can see that we have a ways to go to get to that. Next slide, please. This is like another graph that is using that same data. So you can see the bottom row is numbered 1 through 10. So those are the rankings. Again, 1 being the least amount of health disparities, 10 being the most. And you can also see that it is by percentage of population by race and ethnicity. And you can see that in areas that have the highest percentage of white people is where there are the lowest environmental health disparities rank. And conversely, people of color are facing the biggest burden of this environmental health disparity work. Next slide, please. So some of the issues specific to Washington State are just giving a little bit more context for the data. Is, for example, if you live within 1 mile of SeaTac, there are higher rates of lung, oral, and throat cancer. We see consumption of contaminated fish, and so a lot of tribal, immigrant, and Asian communities consume greater quantities of fish from waterways that are contaminated with things like methylmercury and PCBs. And although not Unique to Washington, people of color and low-income people living in urban industrial areas have increased rates of respiratory disease and lower birth rates. And farm workers have, elevated levels of pesticide exposure. And a lot of these folks don't have access to adequate health care. And these issues can really be traced back to institutionally racist policies like exclusionary redlining and zoning, and immigration practices and policies. Next slide, please. And so what the HEAL Act is really asking us at Ecology and other state agencies to do is to prioritize the people who are most impacted by this. And it instructs us to consider, plan for, and address environmental and health disparities, so that we don't do business as usual, but that we actually use an equity lens to achieve environmental justice. Next slide, please. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but I wanted to explain really what the requirements are of the HEAL Act so you know what the agency is now required to do to implement environmental justice. So these are some of the key requirements. We are developing a tribal consultation framework to improve how we as an agency do government-to-government consultation with sovereign nations, with tribal nations. We're developing a community engagement plan, improving how we connect with and prioritize communities who are most impacted by our laws, like communities of color and low-income communities. We're incorporating environmental justice into our agency strategic plan, so kind of formalizing our EJ work. And a big one is budget equity. So we're trying to figure out, this is part of what the HEAL Act instructs us to do, is to direct 40% of our expenditures to communities most impacted by environmental justice. And not only directing 40% of that money, grants and loans, different kinds of expenditures, capital projects, but also how to involve communities in the budget decision-making processes. So it's not just getting more, but also being involved in how that's being done. Then we're also conducting what we call environmental justice assessments for the different agency actions, which is kind of a mouthful, but essentially we're assessing the environmental justice implications of the things that we do, like implementing laws or new grant programs. And we're also not just assessing them, but that assessment is going to change the course, letting those assessments change the course of the actions that we do. And then finally, we're developing an environmental justice metrics for tracking and reporting. And this is kind of to lean into more government transparency, more public engagement, but also just knowing what our progress is in implementing the HEAL Act, knowing where your money is going, what's happening in your community, so you're more aware of what kind of toxic cleanups are happening, that kind of information, and just sort of opening the door more to the public so that there is more collaboration. Next slide, please. I'm really grateful for organizations that are doing this work on the ground, who are pushing this forward. And this is a logic model that was done by Front and Centered that kind of shows a roadmap of how agency change can lead to better health outcomes. And so you can kind of see that we're going from agency structural change to agency actions to seeing changes in the environment and the community context and seeing improved community health and well-being. Next slide, please. And I don't think you can see the text, so I'll just say it out loud. But I wanted to give an example from my work because I do work not for the whole agency, but for hazardous waste and toxics reduction. And so some of the HEAL Act and some of the environmental justice work in action is through this exciting new law called the Toxic Free Cosmetics Act that was passed in 2023. Because we know that many chemicals in cosmetics are linked to harmful impacts on health, such as cancer and hormone disruption and reproductive and developmental toxicity. And so we are going to restrict some of those chemicals in these cosmetics that disproportionately impact women of color. And we really want to prioritize, for example, reimbursing businesses and communities that are most impacted, because we're going to be starting to restrict these chemicals. And we want to make sure that the businesses like cosmetologists have the resources they need to get safer products. Because we know that Black women and professional salon workers, who are predominantly immigrants and women of color, experience some of the highest rates of exposure of these chemicals. And we're kind of starting to implement this law. And so it's a really great opportunity to be involved in the implementation of this law. And so if this is a topic that impacts you, I would love to hear from you, because we are starting to do collaborations with people like cosmetologists. And right now is like the perfect time to get involved, so that we kind of know what products that we can prioritize in reimbursing, and, you know, sort of things like that. And with that, the next slide, please. I just want to offer myself as a connection to the state Department of Ecology. So if you have any environmental justice concerns that you would like us to know about, if you want any resources, they don't have to be related to hazardous waste or toxics reduction. It could be you wanting to know more about toxic cleanups in your neighborhood. If you want to know more about the Climate Commitment Act and how we're trying to improve air quality in certain areas of the state. If you're interested in water quality, anything, you can contact me and I would love to connect with you. And then I also wanted to put up the contact information for our amazing program manager, Millie Piazza, who has been tirelessly working on environmental justice at the state for decades and has been instrumental in, you know, creating the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice and the creation of these environmental justice planning positions. And she offered her contact information as well. So yeah, thank you so much for hearing me talk about what we're up to at the Department of Ecology, and I look forward to connecting with you. I also wanted to leave this last slide. Maybe we can go back to the email slide afterwards. But if you go to the next slide, oh man, it's not showing up. Okay, go back to my slide. Just contact me, and we have a lot of grants. We have a lot of sort of mapping tools to help you understand what issues are in your neighborhood. And I would love to, you know, connect you with that and provide those resources. Thank you.
Was Lizzie Baskerville from the Washington Department State of Ecology. Next up, we have a lecture by Charles Jeffries, Seattle Central College, professor of psychology, also Nick Jeffries' father, who did Black Earth Day. We got a lot of exciting stuff coming up for Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Once again, thank you to Lizzie Baskerville for that wonderful presentation from the Department of Ecology. And we'll be right back after this.